Um, the time is 6:08, and the date is Wednesday, March 6th.
Read it where it's at.
The place is the Administration Building, 1401 East 144th Street, East Chicago, Indiana, 46312. We are live in person and via live stream at www.schoolcityscec.k12.in.us. This is a meeting of the school board and public for the purpose of conducting the school corporation's business and is not considered to be a public community meeting. We will go ahead with roll call. Trustee Gibson King,
Present.
Trustee Gomez,
Present.
Trustee Smith,
Present.
Trustee Rodriguez. Trustee Rodriguez is not here. And then the Board President, Trustee Arteaga, is here. Can we please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the
United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands,
one nation, under God.
indivisible. All right, tonight we have one thing on the agenda, and it is an update on the HVAC system. Dr. Mitchell.
Yes, thank you. We've run into an issue with the HVAC and the delivery of equipment. Back when this bid was taking place in 2022, we selected Trane as the provider for the HVAC equipment. Since that time, Trane has had difficulty acquiring or procuring the equipment, thus putting us in a really compromised position in terms of being able to remain in compliance with the ESSER funds that this project's being funded out of, and having their work completed on time. Just based on the way that the ESSER funds are allocated, we have to have not only the equipment in and work done by December 2024, but everything would have to be encumbered by that time. By Trane not being able to deliver all the equipment in a timely manner, and some equipment not being delivered until February 2025, we've run into a compromised position in that the ESSER funds wouldn't be able to cover this, and any expenses occurred after 2024 would be borne by the district. And that means that this $24 million project will probably cost the district $17 million instead of $0. And so therefore, we're bringing forth tonight an alternative to that, to ensure that this project is done on time, on budget, and in compliance with the ESSER funds. So what you have before you is a report from our project manager, HPM, Terrence Craven, and he has three scenarios here. The first scenario is that we stay the course with Trane and have 75% of the deliveries, they'll be in by 2024, and then the other quarter of deliveries will be in February 2025. What this does is that puts us in a very precarious situation, because we know that this project won't be completed in 2024, which means that we go into a cost overrun. And also, by the equipment not coming in until September 2024, that puts us in a time where we're coming into some tricky weather, which means that it's not even guaranteed that we're going to have weather that's good enough for us to even do those installs at that time. The second option is to cancel the order with Trane and purchase the equipment from Dakin. And Dakin was one of the bidders that bidded on this project at the same time Trane did back in December of 2022. Now, their cost for equipment was a little bit more. If you see, it was only at that time $100,000 more. But they have the equipment, and they can deliver that equipment if we expedite it for a cost of $207,000. And that brings that total cost to $1.4 million. Now, with this one, Train will also refund us $1,070,000, which makes this project be roughly about, it costs $200,000, but as we go on, I'll tell you how we can make up that cost. And then a third option is to cancel Train and have the contractors order the units. If we have the contractors order the units, it's going to cost us $1.7 million and some change. However, it's not guaranteed that the small contractors are going to have as much weight in the market to get that equipment in on a timely manner. So we're anticipating that cost to be more if we went with the third option. So my recommendation tonight is to go with option 2, cancel the Train order, get a refund back, have that equipment in this summer, and have it all installed by December of 2024. I also brought with me a packet that you all received in your board meeting, the board meeting before last, that has the actual contractors, Pangier and Amber, and their cost. And if you were looking at their cost, and I guess you all have, their cost came up to about 21 million, but we've budgeted about 24 million for this. So we do have a little money to cover this cost, because we did build in that those miscellaneous dollars just in case we ran into any issues such as like this. We weren't expecting to have an issue on equipment. We most probably were expecting to have an issue with having to crash the project at the end, which would have cost more. And crashing the project means they'll just have to put more people on a project, which drives the costs up. But we do have the dollars to cover that. And I spoke with the Attorney Harris on last night to see if he could reach out to Train to get a really clear course of action of how they would pursue this. If they were going to be easy with giving us the $1 million back, or if they were going to try to fight it. But of course, they signed a contract saying that they would have this equipment in time to have the project completed by December 2024. So I don't anticipate a really chance of getting that $1 million back. It just becomes a matter of when we will get it back. So if you have any questions, I will take any questions at this time.
This particular option number 2, it will be in place before, school starts when?
Yes, with option number 2, with expedited shipping, the materials will be in mid to late June, and we're already prepping for it now. So prepping will start next week. So we've already identified rooms in the building that will serve as the designated areas. We have univents already in. We already have the contractors and the subcontractors scheduled. This is just a matter of part of the systems that sit on the roof. So yes, we will have, we've built in enough time into the schedule that we can have most of this equipment installed by the start of school. Now, the equipment that this really is dealing with is chillers, and of course our weather will be, to have those chillers be a little delayed. It's not as bad as having your heating units being delayed in the wintertime. So this is a matter of having chillers for the buildings being delayed, and so that's where your delay is coming in at.
Why are we so late doing this? What happened? What happened that we're so late?
Well, what transpired back in June of 2023, there was a meeting that was held. And in that meeting, there was, the representation from the school district was, at that time, the leader of the district, and there was a timeline that was established. But after that, the things transpired in the district, there was no one holding Schmidt and Associates accountable for that. When I found out about it, I called them to the table, and I had them crash the schedule up front to get us to this date. Otherwise, it would be April before we would have even had the pre-bid openings. We had those pre-bid openings last month. And so now now we have the project on schedule to be completed by 2024. Again, things become really, you find yourself in a quagmire when you don't have project managers and operations folk in place to actually move this type of large expenditure project that has a lot of moving pieces.
Mr. President,
Trustee Gomez?
I understand Trustee Gibson King's concern, and it's, to me, problematic that somebody we've hired as a project manager wouldn't reach out to us earlier if this indeed was, an issue or, reared its head. It's like a half a year's gone by without us, tail end of last year, without us addressing this. It's unfortunate.
If I can answer that, HPM was not the project manager on this project last year. HPM was brought in to oversee the block project and the windows that was going on. We brought in HPM in January on this particular project. It was voted on in December. They started work in January on this project. This train incident with them having not been able to procure the equipment, we just found about this on Thursday, Friday of last week. And therefore, this email is actually dated Friday. We found out about it, we immediately went to find alternatives to keep the project on time, on schedule, and under budget.
I understand that, and I appreciate your comments that there was a project manager, though, last year, is what I'm getting to. I'm not blaming HPM. I'm saying there was another project manager that that was working on this project, and I think Attorney Harris, talked about that at our last meeting, that it might be an option for one of our students to be involved in a project management side. So this is very disappointing to see. I guess my question would be, is there a way, I mean, this is the first time we're seeing this, so I guess one of my questions would be, is there a way to, under item 2, we're looking at train reimbursing us or a little bit over $1 million. Given that there was this situation that we're in now, we don't have the equipment readily available. If there's any additional costs, can we seek that cost differential from Train? Attorney Harris?
Yes. Yes, we can.
Okay. Maybe I'm not, do I see that here somewhere? Or is that something we would have to add to?
I don't think what's factored in here, and Dr. Mitchell, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think there's a cost differential that's factored in here because we don't necessarily know what that might be. I think there's just additional costs associated with expedited shipping, so that's where
Right.
the 207 comes from. But outside of that, I think we would just be refunded from Train what we were intended to originally pay, and then we go forward with whatever other arrangement you all choose or whatever Dr. Mitchell's recommending. Is that
Yeah.
correct, Dr. Mitchell?
Yes, you're correct, and that's what we spoke about on yesterday, trying to figure out what that remedy would be. And so, again, I did speak with the attorney on this about getting on top of this as quick as we could. I was able to get him the document on yesterday, and like I said, we've been working on this since we found out. We found out on Thursday at the end of business day. Friday, this went out to get a good good view of it about what to do, and then we just been working from this time, really just trying to inform Pangier, Amber, all of the contractors that were on board, and now we're at a point where we want to bring this to you for your information, but also to see if this is a route that you want to go. I recommend that we go this route and that we make a decision quickly, because if we don't make a decision on the equipment that we know is in possession of this company now, we run a risk of having a bunch, X amount of $1 million of univents out there that won't be able to be installed because we won't have that, and then we also run the risk of losing the ESSER dollars that must be expended with project completed by December of 2024.
Dr. Mitchell, I remember when we first started this project, June 20 fund and HVAC. Right after
Right after
COVID, and they kept putting a stop to it. So this should have been done a long time ago, but because of the lack of cooperation or whatever it may have been, it got pushed back. Everybody else in all the other districts jumped on it. So their systems were already put in place when the prices were down. Then because of the, I don't want to say confusion, but the misunderstanding or whatever, the longer we waited, see, everybody else got theirs at one price. So the longer we waited to get ours in, the prices went up. So that was one of the situations. So that's why it's a little bit more now as opposed to when we first started talking about this, because this project has probably been on the table for about 2 years. Am I correct? Right. So
Roughly. Mhm.
that's the reason why
Yeah.
this cost is what it is.
Right.
Because, everybody else, and then they said, by everybody doing all this at one time, all the companies,
It created supply chain
it was
issues.
impossible to get the parts or whatever, the equipment that we needed. So that was a holdup too, because everybody was already doing theirs. Sorry to say, we're about the last one that about probably getting their project completed.
Yes, and from the perspective of the ESSER funds, we had to submit a report on last week, just outlined, because after you all voted on the contractors, we had to submit a report to the feds about the contractors and everything. So we submitted that report, and actually just yesterday, one of the contractors wanted to change a subcontractor, so we had to also make a correction there on how they can make a change to a subcontractor that's already been submitted to the feds. So that's been taken care of, and the project manager did assist with that also. So again, I think that we find ourselves in, it's not a great position, because with all the delays and the procrastination, we find ourselves here today, but it's not as bad as it could be if we continue to procrastinate. We do need to make sure that we get in front of the supply chain issue by having this company go ahead or having someone go ahead and identify this information. Now, we did spend a lot of time trying to find another company that could supply the equipment. It just so happened that this company could do so in a timely manner that comes fairly well recommended. And also, they were a bidder back in 2022 when Trane was selected. So there's no need to go through a rebid because they had already bidded on this, and so and they didn't change their pricing. They just have that expedited shipping. Because again, they're going to incur costs to get those products into us, that equipment.
Mr. President, I do have a question. I think it's related to what Dr. Mitchell was referring to. Can I go ahead?
Go ahead.
Okay. So basically, the alternative that's being offered here is Dakin equipment, right? From Trane to Dakin. And I'm curious whether or not, and I think you kind of just alluded to it in your comments, that you did go out there and look at what some of the options were. Can you elaborate for the board on what some of those options were outside of just the Dakin equipment? Because my thought is, with the 207,000 expedited shipping costs, that makes it materially different than what was included in their original bid. And I don't say that to disqualify them in any way, but it does open the door for us to consider an emergency procurement solely for the purpose of purchasing this equipment because of the situation and timeline that we're in now. But what I don't know is whether or not any other comparable equipment is available from any other vendors, and whether it's even feasible to go down that road, because I don't know what's available.
Right. Well, to answer your question, there was no one that was able to get us this equipment this year. Dayton was the only one that even remotely had an opportunity to even get the equipment. We also have Bryan Products in the district. We contacted Bryan directly. They was like, we can't, if Train can't do it, we know we can. They didn't have it either. I guess, some of these products, some of this equipment, they use a similar manufacturer and it's just rebranded. And Dayton is a actual manufacturer.
Can I ask whether or not there was any contact with Johnson Controls?
Johnson, yes, Johnson Controls will contact, they don't do these, they will install and they can procure, but they usually they use Train equipment, they use Bryan, so they're equipment agnostic. So they would have to order that equipment from somewhere themselves, yeah. Which would put them down by number 3, right, so.
Mr. President?
Yeah, Trustee Gomez?
Thank you. So similarly to Attorney Harris's question, so it looks like the 1.243 and a 207 is going to bring us to 1450. But it says there, which includes the latest design change. Is that a design change with the equipment or the potential for a design change?
No, there was a design change that had, when Train bidded on this, they used design documents that were not completed. Those design documents were not completed until the beginning of January, when I called Smith and Associates to the table. And they said they were at 90% complete, so that wasn't good. And they were at 90% complete back in June, when they said they would be complete in 10 days. So 10 days turned into 6 months. Again, when you don't monitor projects, this is what happened. It didn't cost them anything. They made money during that whole time. So, yes, that's a design change that Train bidded on a contract that didn't have a completed set of design documents. So that quote is, they didn't change theirs. There's just the updated, the shipping, that they were still able, they're honoring their original bid of $1,243. But of course, at this time, they don't want to eat the shipping cost to get it, for expedited. And the reason that shipping cost is so much, you're talking about heavy equipment that requires probably is coming from overseas. You got riggers that have to come out. Well, you're familiar with all this work, Trustee Gomez. Anytime you have a rigger involved in something, your cost is going to be exponential anyway.
Yeah, so just so I'm clear, because I know we've dealt with a lot of documents over the months regarding this. So the original cost was how much?
Train's cost
Recall,
was, Train's total cost of equipment was 11.6, well, 1.16,
Okay, I see it.
1.2.
Okay, got it.
Yeah,
And
and Dakin's cost was 1.243, so
Right.
there was really a
Got
$100,000
it.
difference at the
Okay.
time in 2022.
Yeah.
When this was done. Now, Train can't deliver until total delivery until February 2025, but Dakin still can, but they're going to incur a cost to expedite that.
And then that was, I guess, part of my next question was the delivery date shows mid to late June for number 2, and then the chillers in late August. Obviously, school's going to be in session by the second part of that chillers delivery. How does that, I'm imagining it's going to have some impact on
Yeah.
school.
Yeah, and what we did, we put in a contingency plan at the very beginning, and that contingency plan was that as they do these buildings, they're going to do the buildings in sections. And so at this point, they will be able to install all of the univents. They'll be able to install all the wiring and ductwork and cabinetry, and all they would have is just doing a connection of those chillers on the roof. But for the most part, everything else will be installed. So it's not going to disrupt classes so much that we won't be able to accommodate any changes, major changes in our curriculum itself, or maybe a move of a class or two. And we're in a great position with that because we have underutilization in a couple of our buildings. So if they're at McKinley, we can use some space at Harrison, and vice versa, Harrison use McKinley. Washington has a bit of space, and then, of course, we have Gosh and the other schools that we can probably put classes in if we had to, if push came to shove. We don't anticipate that happening, but we have spec'd it out and spoken with the principals to let them know that we may have to have some changes for a short period of time.
Yeah, I don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I can't help but ask, because if they're going to be locating this equipment on roofs, it's, obviously you're going to have cranes in the parking lot or on the property to do that. I had another question, I can't remember what it is now.
Mr. President, go
I'm
ahead.
sorry,
Yep.
just, I believe this might be the final one. What happens in the event we run into another issue and now we're, with Dakin and they somehow fail, whether it's a supply chain?
That's actually what I was going to speak to. So I'll piggyback on that, and just, my question was going to be, is there a guarantee that Dakin's willing to provide? In light of the fact that we're paying $200,000 plus for expedited shipping,
Yeah.
is that also inclusive of some form of a guarantee?
Yeah, right now, there's a guarantee, but we would want that to be contractual,
Correct.
right? So we want to make sure that as we reach out to Dakin, we want to do it by Friday so that we don't run into any more issues. But that's why I wanted you to reach out to Train to start that. And then if there's okay with this before the board vote on Monday, that we can at least start to figure out what our options are before a final decision is made by the board to move it. But we would know that whatever language needed to be, whether or not they agree with it or not. So that's always is to mitigate the risk before you have the damage, right? So.
All right.
So we've already paid them some of this money, right? Have we given them this money already?
A little bit over $1 million.
They already got this money already.
Yes, they got it,
When did
but,
they get this money?
pardon?
When did they get this money?
I'm not sure exactly when they received that, but it was probably at the initiation when they placed their order. Once they made that order, they probably submitted a PO, and that PO was honored. But that's how that works, right? Anytime you order equipment, there's a PO issued. I imagine that they didn't know at that time that their supplier wasn't going to be able to deliver.
All right, are there any further questions or any further discussion on this matter?
Just one final one for me is the, this is out of ESSER 4, correct?
This is 3.
ESSER 3, there's no ESSER 4.
I'm sorry, I was looking up numbers right now. Okay, thank you. What do we have left, if anything, or we depleted that?
We still have, I think we still have $21, $22 million in ESSER. So again, you can't encumber funds that, it's fee for service, right? So we haven't been able to encumber any because the project hasn't fully started, executed. But the funds have been encumbered. So we do have, now that we submitted the document that you all voted on, the 6.2 million for Pangier for Harrison, the 7.1 for McKinley, and the 7.3 for Washington. Though we submitted this to the state last week to say that these projects, that we're encumbering the funds at those amounts.
All right, is there any other further questions or discussions at this time?
No, we can't vote no way. You can't vote him no way.
All right, so go ahead, trustee Gomez.
And just, before we conclude I would like to ask, that this project manager give us a weekly update, given that we've run into this problem. I think, to me, obviously, there was a gap last year.
I will share my weekly
Thank
update
you,
with
yeah,
you.
'cause it just
Yeah,
seems
yeah,
that-
and so that's no problem. And that's how we stay on top of this.
Yeah, exactly.
I've asked him to give me a week, update every Friday.
That'd be great.
And so that's how we've been able to put the project back on track. Again, without that level of communication, these things can go awry. Like I said, that's how we went 6 months
Sure.
without this project moving anywhere. There was no communication, there was no project manager on it. We had Smith and Associates that was driving it, but of course, if they're getting paid, they submit, but then once I'm holding them accountable, that's an issue,
Yeah,
right?
agree, yeah. So,
So,
yeah, I think, because it doesn't reflect well on us, but, I think, given this situation, we have to, have all hands on deck for this. We'll make sure it happens, as trustee Smith says. Yeah, exactly, good point.
All right, well, thank you, Dr. Mitchell, for taking the time. Thank you to the trustees for taking the time to discuss these ongoing issues with our HVAC system. Like we all said, I think we would really appreciate that weekly update, especially with such an important project that's going on. So with that being said, is there a motion for adjournment? All right,
I'll second.
all right. Motion made by trustee Smith, second by trustee Gomez. We will go ahead and begin with the roll call. Trustee Gibson King,
Yes.
trustee Gomez,
Yes.
trustee Smith, and myself, yes.
Okay, I'm gonna, let you know that, Jesse needs to be on the policy committee, so I'm getting off.
Oh, you sure?
Yeah, because I called him.